seems that the word happiness is actually not the right word for what we're looking for, and that will explain why it's so difficult to find. All right, I want to welcome you to the second episode of the Break the Locks podcast. I'm Jay Kitamura. Today, we're going to talk about true happiness and long term fulfillment. Now, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. It helps the algorithm so more people can get this information and we can change the world together. But without further ado, let's start talking about this important topic: happiness, long term fulfillment, and your purpose. So, I did write a book. It's called The Four Keys. If you want to check it out, the link is below in the description. But the whole premise of there was to determine what the ingredients to happiness really are. And the way this all came about is about 15 years ago or so, I was working in venture capital. And I started to notice a pattern with my clients. And these clients were very well off. It wasn't, you know, doctors and lawyers and things like that. There were people that had generational money. There were people that had enough money to buy islands. I remember a conversation I had with a lady who was telling me, "Hey, you should go, hop on a plane and go check these islands out. They're a steal. I'm thinking of buying one or two of them." Like, seriously, you're buying islands? Okay, it just went right over my head. But the interesting thing that I found is that I did notice a pattern between all these people, and that was that they were not happy. A lot of them were not happy. And that really messed with my head because, like, I was only working in venture capital because I wanted to make money because I thought money equaled happiness. So, just because of my personality, I get kind of obsessed with things and figuring out how things work. This obsession became, what is true long-term happiness? And that's where this all came about. It ended up just being a guide for myself. Then I got married and had kids, and I was like, okay, I should put it together in a more formal way. And then I started talking to people about it, and they're like, hey, you should write a book. I would read it. So it became a book. So that was my very first book, and you can get it at the link below. Leave a good review. So, again, the algorithm helps people out. But this is essentially really what it's about, is what I've discovered over the last 10 years of researching originally true long-term happiness and fulfillment. Then it went to, what creates successful people and what brings people a sense of motivation. And, it became coaching. So I got really obsessed with that. So a lot of the things are all stemmed from the ideas of what I kind of discovered or realized from writing the book. And that is that our entire lives, everything that we do is determined by two factors. That's our subconscious programming and our desires. And we talked about subconscious programming in the very first episode of this podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about desires. That's the basically foundation for the four keys. So, what is happiness? That's how we begin with. Let's start in a very nerdy way by looking at the definition. Okay, so the definition of happiness is a state of joy, a state of well-being, and when you look at that word in itself, is that really what we're searching for? Are we searching for a state that kind of comes and goes? Of course not. We are looking for something long term. We're looking for something that sticks, a long term happiness, not a state. So it seems that the word happiness is actually not the right word for what we're looking for. And that will explain why it's so difficult to find because there's billions of people on this planet, a lot of smart people. You would think that there is a blueprint to happiness at this point. But there really isn't. Everybody has their different ideas of what happiness is, and there's a huge pandemic of people who are depressed and unhappy. So that's kind of my mission, to make sure people are aware of this information so they can live their best lives, because we have a very short time on this planet. So you might as well make the best of it. So going back, the word happiness. So what is that? If that doesn't mean the long-term happiness that we're all craving, if that's not the long-term, you know, feeling good, what is it? So a state of joy or feeling good, that's stimulation. So for example, let's keep the theme of ice cream. If you listen to the first episode, if I eat an ice cream cone, it'll give me a sense of stimulation. Well, is that happiness? A lot of times they say, oh, yeah, I feel happy because I ate this ice cream. But is that the true happiness that we're craving? No, it's just stimulation. So the first part to understand your long term happiness is to be able to differentiate what brings you long term happiness and the ingredients to that long term happiness versus what is just stimulation. You can see it in kids. Kids love iPads, they love playing on their phone, they love video games. And when you take it, they get depressed. They're like, "Oh, my entire reason for life is gone because you took away my video game." Now, I'm not trying to put anybody on blast, but you know who you are. But it's a common thing because that stimulation is what brings a smile to their face, but it's a temporary smile. And the bad thing about stimulation is that the more that you get, the less it starts to work. Just like any drug, it's like a drug. You build a tolerance to it, then suddenly it just doesn't work anymore. Then you have to find something stronger, more stimulating, and then over time you'll get bored of that. It just loses its effect. So that is not the long term happiness that we're searching for. But what is that long term happiness? So let's try to first think of a word that means long term happiness. And I did a lot of research on this and asked a lot of people, and I'll tell you what kind of the consensus was. The consensus was first was to be content. Contentment in a lot of religions and a lot of different you know literature means happiness. But I want you to ask yourself honestly: does being content feel like the long-term happiness that you're craving? Essentially, being content means to accept the cards that you're dealt. Does that sound like true long-term happiness? To me, it doesn't, because we are a species that's trying to thrive and grow and expand and improve. The cards that we're dealt makes us stagnant, and things that don't move are dead. So that doesn't seem like the right word. So the closest word that we found was fulfillment. And I believe this is actually the correct word, to be fulfilled. But the problem is, fulfill what? It doesn't really tell us anything. It's like, you need to be fulfilled, but what am I fulfilling? Tell me the secret, right? So that is the question. What do we need to fulfill to have long term happiness? So we determined there's not a good word that explains what that is besides fulfillment. But is there a word that means long term sadness? And this is where I kind of came to the realization by just looking the opposite direction. Is there a word? And the thing is, there is. That's depression. Depression means a long term state of sadness. I mean, people throw around the word incorrectly. They just feel sad. So they say, oh, I feel depressed. But the true meaning of depression is that you're in a long state of sadness. And wouldn't it be great if we had the opposite of that? Wouldn't it be great if we had a long term state of happiness? That's actually what we're all searching for. We're searching for that. So, in order to find the ingredients to long term happiness, we just need to look at the flip to see what fulfills us. And that's the opposite of depression. So, the four main symptoms of depression are feelings of hopelessness, feelings of insecurity and stress, feelings of worthlessness, and feelings of disconnection. So, the four ingredients to being fulfilled and to long term happiness, and which I call the four keys, are hope, security, value, and connection. So, this is very important to understand this concept because they actually work like doorways So that the reason I call them keys is because you have to unlock each door. If you don't have hope and you're stuck behind the door of hope, you have zero hope. And this is where you'll find most people that have very serious depression. They don't believe that tomorrow can be a better day. So they have no will and no drive to continue on. So if you have no hope, you're stuck. So you need to unlock that door. Once you find your hope and open the door, you're now into security. Security is caring for yourself, being in a good spot to feel like you're safe and secure. People who have no hope for tomorrow could care less about this. That's why they go into a downward spiral. But now you need to find security. And this is where most people, especially in the Western world, are stuck behind because society has put us into a place of constant stress. You look at the news and you see constant bad news, makes us fear each other. Bills, people are worried and how they're going to pay their rent or their mortgage. You're in a constant state of fight or flight, which is unnatural. Because in the old days, fight or flight was meant for, hey, this saber-toothed tiger is going to eat me. I'm either going to get away or not. So it's a quick thing. You're either eaten and you're done, or you got away, right? None of this, I'm worried for 6 months because I can't pay my bills, right? It's not good for the body. But most people are stuck behind this sense of security. So you need to start to understand what security really truly means to you. And by understanding that some of these things are not as bad as they should be, they're not life threatening, we start to feel a little lighter and a little easier and more secure about our situation. You have to look at your environment, the people you're around. All this is going to tend to your security, but also your inner strength. Understanding that you have the inner strength to persevere can increase your security. Once you have a sense of security in yourself, now you have the ability to open the door to value. So you have that security that you're safe. You're not going to go underwater. You're not going to drown. You're not going to die. Now it's time to build your value. Value, the third key is two parts. It's your actual value to the world around you and your perceived value. Two different things because in your mind, you may have a pre-programmed way of understanding what value is, but you need to understand what true value is to the people around you, the world around you, and to yourself. So at the beginning, it's two separate ones, but once you start to understand better, it can merge into one, but that's value. Once you have a sense of value, that you have a reason for being here, you have you have a purpose. You know why you're here and who you're helping and what you're contributing to, that you're a piece of a puzzle that's important to everything around you. Now you can open the door to connection, and that's what that is. Understanding that you're part of something bigger, understanding that you're part of something important to yourself, and understanding that you feel that you fit. So those are the things that we need to fulfill in order to have long-term happiness. But it doesn't stop there because once those doors are open, it's a constant growth and a constant improvement of those four keys. Again, we're species that want to improve and grow. So improving each one of those aspects is just going to better our lives. So before we conclude, I want to talk a little bit about free will because I think this is a really important thing to understand, especially it'll tie in with your subconscious programming that we talked about in the first episode. So if you haven't watched, I encourage you to listen or watch to the first episode of the podcast. But the difference between humans and lower life forms is pretty clear once you start understanding this concept. And it'll kind of give you a little more insight into some deeper things, which I'll leave with you for a while, but we can discuss them more in depth later. But first off, there's a big, I guess, in the scientific world and in the software world, the idea of randomness, the idea of random numbers. They technically don't really exist. Nothing is truly random. Even the numbers that we do in computer science and programming, um, they were based on some sort of algorithm based on time, and then now the ones that they believe are truly random are not, because they take um, external factors like the position of the mouse, or weather, whatever it may be. It's these external factors to try to create that randomness, but there is no randomness. And when you look into the universe, they've actually are finding that nothing's really random. There's some sense of patterns, and if we don't see it, if we think it's random, we need to take a step back. The further back you look, you'll start to understand that there is a pattern to it, and we've been discovering that more and more. So if you understand that there's nothing that's random, then what is free will? What is free will? We believe we have free will, and actually, that's the difference between lower life forms and us humans, is the ability to have free will. Because other animals, lower life forms, they react specifically on their physical desires. So that is what we're going to be discussing, the differentiating factors between your spiritual desires and your physical desires. So your physical desires is a set of desires that you have built into your DNA, things especially like reproduction and things that'll make the species thrive and grow. Those are all innately built into you, otherwise the species will cease to exist, right? The four keys that we just talked are your spiritual desires. It's desires that we all have. But the cool thing is we actually can define what those are. We need those ingredients, but we can define how we fulfill those ingredients. And we could talk about that later. But just understand this concept that the physical desires, things like needing to eat and all the things that are sent through us through our DNA, our fears, that is essentially what lower life forms are controlled by. So that's why even when you look at children, before language is developed, before they have some brain maturity, they just kind of act on will, right? It's like whatever they see, they want it, they go. Same as like animals, like they want it, they go. There's no thinking of like, hey, should I get it? Should I not? No, it's more instinctual, right? Based on their energy that's been pre-programmed on them. So free will, if you believe that there is no randomness, is actually not randomness, but it's the ability to have basically a duality in yourself. So we are like two entities in one. We have a set of physical desires, we have a set of spiritual desires, and they don't always mesh together. Sometimes they conflict. So that confliction is actually the key to free will, because now we have the ability to not act on our physical desires. Otherwise, just imagine the chaos that we would be if every innate animal desire you handed you just acted on it, right? No, we have these spiritual desires that we overlay on top, and we have the ability to choose. We have the ability to choose which path we take. If it's going to fulfill our long-term fulfillment, or it's going to fulfill this short-term stimulation, we have that choice. And that choice creates that free will. And it's a gift. It's a gift to have these desires, these spiritual desires. So when you're trying to fulfill them, understand that it's a gift, and understand that it allows you to stem away from the animalistic side of your brain and be able to control yourself to have long-term fulfillment. So I know that's a lot to pack in, and we can get into it a lot more. Um, I encourage you to check out the webinar I put together. It's 75 minutes. I honestly believe that 75 minutes can change your life. It's the link below. It's breakthelocks.com/J Kitamura. It's normally $199, absolutely free for you guys today. Give me some feedback. Let me know what you think on it. But yeah, we can go a lot more in depth into that. And stay tuned for future episodes. Don't forget to subscribe. And until next time, talk to you guys later.